So thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a new update the VA is providing. My name is James Connolly with the Oregon Department of Veteran Affairs, and I am part of the training, outreach, and coordination team. So we're going to be giving a little bit of an update today on priority processing within the VA and asking them for consideration of an expeditious claim or a faster processing claim. Now, this is a little bit of a formalization of the process. It isn't going to be, it's not really a new process. The VA has had this consideration prior to this. However, the new update that we're providing is going to be a formalization of that process and a new form. And so we're going to take a quick look at that new form and the criteria that they can consider when asking for a priority processing request. So the new priority processing form was created just a couple months ago. So it was generated in April of 2020. So we're getting this information out to you fairly quickly. But the VA did release a VA Form 20-10207, VA Priority Processing Form. And so next we're going to go into consideration and look at that form, but we're going to talk about some conditional understanding. I think it's important to communicate that this is a request for priority processing. This is a veteran or a veteran family member can use this form as well. So a claimant, they are asking the VA for consideration to fast track their claim. However, the conditional understanding here is process this claim faster than usual. So claims processing can take some time. I know I like to tell my clients and veterans that I'm working with can take 6 to 12 months. So we're talking about faster than usual, but it is dependent on the unique situation, the unique details of the claim, and it basically doesn't mean that there's going to be a timeline we can hold the VA accountable to. It just means that they're going to give it some extra consideration and try to process it faster, but it doesn't mean that it's going to process overnight, is what I'm saying. So there's not a definitive timeline, 7 days, 2 weeks, a month that you'll get your decision. So taking a peek at the form, we have the new VA Form 20-10207. It is going to be a veteran-specific form, like all main criteria for filing for veteran benefits. So your veteran information is going to be at the top with current address and phone number and VA file, date of birth, that demographic information. Like I mentioned, it's important to point out that not just veterans can be considered for priority processing. Dependent spouses or claimants, dependent children can also ask for consideration for priority processing, and so that's going to be in section 2 on the form. So if it's other than the veteran, you're going to put the claimant information here in this portion and their detailed information. And then there's consideration here on the form too regarding homelessness. So if they are experiencing homelessness, you can make the selections there and indicate how they're experiencing it, and the VA will try to priority process the claim based on that as well. The next portion is talking about the actual eligibility criteria, or the criteria that the VA is going to consider when processing such request. So there's a few things that they're going to look at, and we're going to talk about that coming up here. But here's a quick glimpse at it on the form here in section 17. So next we're going to be looking at the criteria here for consideration for priority processing. The VA are going to look at a few categories. The first one being experiencing extreme financial hardship. Secondly, terminal illness, diagnosis of ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. They're going to be looking at, was the veteran seriously injured or ill due to military operations, and that led to their discharge from the military. They're also going to consider an age, and so the VA currently looks at 85 years old or above for priority processing. They're going to consider former POWs or prisoners of war, and the last consideration there is going to be for Medal of Honor and Purple Heart recipients. So we'll look at each one of these individually. First one here, we're going to talk about extreme financial hardship. The VA has some sub-criteria there. So when we come across a situation where a claimant is considering this or expressing to us that they are having extreme financial hardship in the form of eviction notices, foreclosures, past due utilities, collection notices from creditors, we can use those pieces of document or those documentations to submit to the VA and ask for consideration in priority processing. Next criteria we're going to talk about is terminal illness. With that, the VA is also going to need some documentation to show that that illness has been diagnosed. It is terminal in nature. So in some cancer diagnoses, we're talking about stage 4 or greater. If the VA or if the veteran doesn't have that documentation or the claimant doesn't have that documentation with them and would like to request the VA to assist them in getting that documentation, we could potentially also submit the VA form, the 21-4142 and 4142A. Next criteria is going to be a diagnosis of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, more commonly called Lou Gehrig's disease. A lot of folks don't know that this is given special criteria in veteran benefits. So if a veteran becomes diagnosed with this condition and served any era, any time, and for a minimum of 90 days, they can ask for service connection regarding this. It also is a criteria here for priority processing. So again, documentation is going to be key. We're going to be showing the claimant is diagnosed with this, or asking the VA to go and get that medical record for or on behalf of the claimant. Next criteria is going to be the criteria for age, or based on age. VA is going to consider 85 plus when considering priority processing of a claim. The date of birth is going to be sufficient, so pretty much that's going to be on all the forms that we submit to the VA, so they will have that, but it's also on the priority processing form, so please submit the correct date of birth. Next criteria is going to be for prisoners of war, or POWs. Documentation there can be or include their DD-214, discharge documentation, certificate of release from their active duty branch. Depends on the era. And then you're going to possibly also want to communicate their branch, dates of service, dates and locations of internment, detaining power. So those specific records would be submitted to the VA as well. Next qualifying criteria we're going to talk about is for our veterans that receive the Medal of Honor or a Purple Heart Award. Documentation could be as simple as a DD-214 certificate of discharge from active duty, or you may need to follow that up with actual citations and award accommodations as well. And lastly, the criteria that we're going to consider here is serious illness or injury during military operations that led to the veteran's discharge. So again, we're going to be submitting potential copies of DD-214, certificate of release or discharge, and we could be also showing those serious injuries led to accommodations such as the Medal of Honor or Purple Heart Award. We could be submitting that type of documentation. Or we could also be looking at medical discharge information as well that we could be submitting to ask for this priority processing request. Conclude this update regarding priority processing in the new form the VA just released in April. If you do have any questions further for ODVA or myself, please reach out to ORVETSbenefits at odva.state.or.us. Thank you and have a wonderful day.